Well, Dr. Grandin, the initiative here that we have put together is it's a charity. It will be a charitable organisation, but the aims are to actually increase the awareness of the benefits that equine assisted activities and all their different guises can bring to people. And obviously, there's a significant part of that has been proven to be successful with the people on the spectrum. And I suppose we've quite an ambitious second view and that is that Northern Ireland would have some parts of the jigsaw already that would let us aspire to being a centre for excellence in this whole arena. That would be the training of therapists and the delivering of therapy and education and learning in this field. So yeah. It's a small team of 5 of us, mostly retired people, some with an equine background, some without. And so you've been a bit of obviously a rock star for some of us, both in the meat industry and in the autism community for some time. The audience that we anticipate having on the 3rd of November will be everybody from health professionals through civil servants involved in education, health, agriculture, probably a lot of people from the autism community, the voluntary sector, and parents and clients. And it is very much part of our desire to spread awareness of this arena, and also not to raise any expectation that this is a mature science or mature practice, that there are obviously quite some gaps in research and in practice and in supervision. It's a lot younger here in Ireland, believe it or not, although we have a lot of horses, than I think it is stateside. And certainly talking to Adam Dario and talking to Wendy Woods and others in Colorado University, I think you have much more of a history and a rigor around the science. So it's supposed to help people understand the journey that has taken place in America and see what we can learn from that. So could I ask you to share some of your early life experience with animals that have helped to shape you?
Well, when I was in high school, horses were my life. And I was bullied in high school a whole lot. And the only place I was not bullied was riding horses, working on electronic projects, things where there was shared interests. I had a roommate and we both were really into horses. I also ran the school's horse barn for 3 years. So I learned how to work. So there's 2 things the horses helped me with, having friends. And the other thing was I learned how to work. I had 9 stalls to clean every day, feed them, put them in and out of the barn. Because one of the big problems I'm seeing with a lot of people with an autism label is they're not learning work skills. I'm seeing students with really super good academic skills, and then they have a trouble in a job because they can't get there on time. Work skills are different than academic skills. So as a teenager, horses were like my total life. And the other thing that really helped me as a teenager was my science teacher. Very important mentor, because he gave me interesting projects, and then studying became a pathway to a goal of becoming a scientist, where before studying was just something that my family wanted me to do. But when it became a pathway to a goal, then I was motivated.
And have you views on the animal-human connection? I suppose those of us that were lucky enough to be raised in an agricultural and rural environment take a lot of this connection for granted. But even here in Ireland, we have to accept we've a very urban society in the last certainly half to full generation. What are your views on that, the value of that connection, and what does it do to society when we lose it?
I think there's a lot of value to it. And the other thing we're losing in a lot of societies is a connection with the practical. I mean, one of the worst things they did in some of our schools was taking out all the hands-on classes, cooking, sewing, woodworking, art, theater. There are also things that can introduce people to careers. We have one really good program in the US called Future Farmers of America. And I tell people you got to fight to keep that program funded, because it teaches students leadership. They work with agriculture, both crops and livestock, and teaches skills like public speaking, also trade skills like welding. I worked with several people building my projects where they own big businesses. And it was the high school welding course that saved them.
My goodness. And your experience later in life with horses, have you kept a connection with horses throughout your life?
Well, not so much. Yeah, now it's more I'm very interested in promoting, therapeutic riding. I'm not riding anymore. My balance has gotten really bad. I'll be 73. I was 73 this summer, so now what I've been spending before COVID hit, I was spending most of my time traveling and doing talks, livestock talks, doing a lot of talks to students, because I think now I want to encourage students to go into agriculture. I have put about 20 graduate students through master's programs, PhD programs. I took book money and speaking engagement money to pay for for 20 students to get their master's or the PhD, and I was their major professor.
Wonderful, wonderful. And the new Temple Grandin Centre, which Adam has shared us some of the images and some of the thinking behind it, that's a very exciting development.
No, I think it's really exciting for several different reasons. First of all, we need to figure out what kind of autistic kids therapeutic riding works on. I've had many parents come to me and say, my kid did their first words on a horse. Well, it may have something to do with rhythm and balancing. And we need to figure out which kids it works on. The other thing is therapeutic riding is a good career for students that are interested in horses to go into.
And what's your view on what's the status of the research around therapeutic riding, and particularly with autistic young people?
Well, there's still a number of studies that show that it definitely has benefits. In fact, one study, I don't remember who did it, they sort of did a real therapeutic riding, and then they did things where you had a fake horse and stuff, and that just did not work the same way.
Some of the people practicing this side of the Atlantic are working on the more groundwork with autistic children, where their behaviour is very challenging, and they seem to be able to get a bridge, a connection in with the child that they can't achieve in conventional therapy. Have you experienced with that?
Well, yes, there's been some good experience also with dogs. There's been similar experience, and what I've observed with especially with autistic children and dogs, there's three ways they react to them: love them, totally love them, and they sort of have a sense of getting along with it. Rupert Isaacson has talked about that with horses. Scared at first, then they really get to like them, and then there's some kids where they're not appropriate. Like the horse may whinny, the dog may bark, and they have a sensory reason for not liking the animal. But there's a lot of situations where animals are extremely effective. The other thing that a dog can do is be a social icebreaker to help you talk to other people, because you can always talk about your dog.
Yeah, yeah. And what would you have advice for us? We're a bunch of amateurs. There's no question about that. There are professionals involved in this arena around autistic people and other disabilities. What would you say should be our priorities? What should be our focus here to help particularly young people? We see young people, and that's not unique to Northern Ireland or the south of Ireland, obviously, but we see young people more aimless and more prone to get involved in things that are going to take away the value of their life.
Well, there's been some good results with veterans, soldiers, PTSD.
Yeah.
That's autistic kids, at-risk youth. That's a fancy word for mainly boys that are going to be getting into piles of trouble, and horses can help turn them around. The other big thing I did with horses was running a horse barn, cleaning the stalls, taking care of the horses. And that taught responsibility and work skills. That's another thing. Now, one mistake I see people do is they tend to overprotect. I've seen quite a few clients at therapeutic riding that I know could ride independently, around the riding arena. They wouldn't need to have a sidewalker person to lead the horse. Now, there's some clients where they're always going to need a sidewalker. But one of the big problems I've seen is overprotection. I'm seeing smart kids with an autism label that are fully verbal and they've never gone grocery shopping. This is just ridiculous. And what you got to do is kind of always keep stretching and see what the person can do. And I see too much of not doing that. Now, it depends a lot upon the teacher that's working with them too. Having a good teacher is just so important.
What's your view? I know a little I've read of Rupert Isaacson's work. He's very keen to involve the entire family with when there's one sibling or one child on the spectrum. That seems to be quite life-changing for the experience.
Yes, it was. Now, one thing we do have to be careful of is sometimes they get, let's say there's more than one child in the family, is that siblings get left out. And this is one thing my mother's talked about in her talks, that it's really important for the siblings to have some quality time.
Yeah.
I was the oldest of 4 children.
And I've seen obviously the movie about your life. What's your views? I mean, you've experienced in your lifetime an enormous change in society in their attitudes towards autism, and no small part, obviously, the huge activity and persistence that you've brought to bear on it. What do you see? What do you think now in the current state of acceptance and understanding of integration of people into society that are labelled with autism?
Well, the problem is autism goes from heads of Silicon Valleys that bring you kind of technology that we're using right now. I've been out to the tech companies. Half those programmers are autistic. I've been to NASA, seen some of their scientists. They have a lot of autistic traits. So at one end of the spectrum, you've got that. And the other end of the spectrum, you've got somebody who cannot talk and may have epilepsy on top of autism. So you've got this big spectrum. And right now there's a controversy in diagnosis, as they took out the Asperger's, which is basically socially awkward with no speech delay, and merged that in with much more severe autism. It's a really big spectrum. Einstein probably was autistic. Thomas Edison was probably autistic. Michelangelo was probably autistic. You see, a person can be more thinking, or a person can be more social emotional. At what point do you slap a label on it? It's a very, very big spectrum. And some individuals on the spectrum are really intelligent, and they're running Fortune 500 companies. And they're also building big construction projects. Mm-hmm. I've worked with some of them.
And where do you see any leaders in the world, in persons or in regions or in countries or universities that are really torch carriers for us for this, that we can learn from?
Well, one of the things that I learned, when you're weird, what you have to do is learn to sell your work. So the way I did a job interview was I simply showed people my drawings. I just laid it and show you some of my drawings right now. And I would just show people my drawings, and they go, oh, maybe you might be weird, but you drew that. Show them pictures of jobs. I learned to sell my work, to make myself really good at a skill that other people wanted. Now, there's 3 different kinds of minds, and they tend to be specialist minds. I'm an object visualizer. Everything I think about is in a picture. And that was shown really nicely in the HBO movie. It showed exactly how I think visually. Another kind of autistic mind is the computer programmer. This is the more pattern thinker, the mathematical, visual spatial thinker, good at mathematics, good at computer programming. Well, if you've got a kid that shows math ability when he's young, you need to be introducing programming. In fact, I was just reading my new Business Week magazine just today, and in India, they're training kids at 9 years old to make phone apps. Well, there's a certain, no, but I mean, seriously, this is the kind of thing where that can turn into a career. And then you've got a third type of mind that is the word mind. They think in words. And Stephen Hawking, the famous physicist, had a really good thing to say about disability. He said, concentrate on those things. Your disability does not prevent you from doing well. And he could do math in his head well and not much else. But he did math in his head really, really well.
Yeah, that's wonderful. The writing of the Disabled Association and the strap line, it's not about what we can't do, it's about what we can do. And I suppose we have a culture here where it's important to get labels onto children to make funding flow towards her and get help and this sort of thing. That's inevitable, but it may also give them a stigma, which I think a lot of the work with the animals can help to remove that stigma where they start to see.
I think that doing things with animals is really good, because along with riding horses, you can learn how to care for horses too, and learn work skills. That's another thing. And I'm seeing too many kids getting overprotected by their parents and not learning any work skills. Then I'll have grandfathers come up to me and they discover that they're probably on the autism spectrum when the grandkids get diagnosed, and granddaddy was an engineer because granddaddy had a paper route when he was 11, and he was mowing lawns and working in some shop when he was a teenager, and he'd learned how to work. Yeah. We don't have anywhere near enough emphasis on work skills. They got to learn how to do a task outside the family on a schedule. Now, it could be something as simple as bringing some water to the horses or some feed.
Dr. Grandin, this has been fantastic. I really, really appreciate your time that you've given us on this, and especially at the weekend. We're going to use this material on the webinar that we have on Tuesday, so many people will hear this and many people will resend it. I will obviously send you links to that. Are you happy for us to use this recording also on our website? We've set a small website.
You can put it up on the website, but basically horses really helped me. I have a paper online that's titled how horses help the teenager with autism make friends and learn how to work, because those were two really big things I did with horses. I was bullied horribly in high school, and horses and riding and getting ready for shows, I was very big on horse shows, were refuges away from bullying and teasing. I had friends in those activities. And then working in the horse barn, I learned work skills every day. Be there, clean those 9 stalls, put the bedding in there, put the horses in and out of the barn, and feed them.
And somebody said that you once used the word that they were almost your salvation. Is that?
Well, yeah, it was horses when I was a teenager were an extremely important part of my life. And there's also been some very good successes with with dogs too. There are some children and adults that just really get along with dogs. And I'm finding that even here in the neighborhood here with all the COVID restrictions, I go out for my walk and there'll be nice friendly dogs. People are walking and we can talk about them.
Wonderful, wonderful. Have you a dog yourself?
No, I don't. See, I was traveling 80% of the time I was traveling.
Yeah.
March 12th, COVID shut down all of my travel. All of the trips have gone online or they were postponed until next year. And so I haven't had any pets. And I keep thinking, well, COVID's going to finally stop. Hopefully we get a vaccine soon. And I haven't been to the airport since March 12th.
Yeah.
And I don't think things are going to be really restricted until we get a vaccine out there that works.
Yeah, it's a big challenge for many that work with children and horses, so they have to be close to them, and obviously they can't really function now at all with the current restriction. Certainly here in Britain and Ireland, that restriction is a significant burden.
Well, the other thing that's a problem is that little kids, they fortunately have opened the little nursery schools right near where I live, and I really like walking by there and seeing all the little kids playing. These are real little kids, like 3- and 4-year-olds. They need to be socializing with other children. That is something that's just essential. Yeah,
and even at that age, they can get something. The animal can be some sort of substitute for that loss of contact.
Well, online doesn't hack it with little kids. Probably the most important kids to get back into schools are the real little kids, the elementary school kids, or what you call primary school.
Yeah.
That's where it's absolutely the most important.
I think a lot of our parents would agree with you on that on several counts. Having them at home all the time has been a challenge for many. Dr. Grandin, I really, really appreciate your time on this. Thank you very, very much indeed. And we look forward, if you're happy for us to keep in touch in some fashion through email and contact, we'd like to keep you informed of where we are. And if there are things that you would like to advise us on, please feel free, because this is it's only the start of a journey for us.
Okay, well, it's going to be a good journey. And the thing I have found on people working with some of these kids, I don't care whether it's autistic kids or maybe it's at-risk youth, some teachers just have the knack. They know how to work with them. You can't emphasize enough of getting the right people to work on your program.
Oh, that's wonderful. And we would love to get the teachers on our webinar. We will have a gentleman speaking who actually saw this activity with his kids, his special needs kids, and he was there to actually stop it happening. He believed it was too dangerous. And as soon as he saw the outcomes, he was a convert. And that's,
well, I don't know. We can get so worried about danger that you don't do anything. I could fall down the stairs in my house. And
yeah, that's where we are. I'm afraid a little bit in this country that we wrap children up in cotton wool. And
that's part of the problem when we were kids. When I was in the 50s, when I was a kid, we were out playing around in the woods and building things and just doing all kinds of stuff outside, riding our bikes everywhere and go shopping and stuff. And kids aren't doing that now.
Yeah, that's exactly the problem. We see a lot of it, and then we see delinquency and problems afterwards. Dr. Grandin, this is great. I don't know whether to say good after have an enjoyable Sunday afternoon, because we'll always have to edit that out, because by the time we expose you to our audience, it'll be Tuesday. But
Okay.
Thank
Well,
you very much.
It's afternoon, and thank you very, very much for having me.
And thank you for the compliment about my article. Coming from you as a published author, that was quite a compliment. Thank you very much.
Well, just it's going to take somebody dedicated, to making the program work and getting some of the right people to do it. One thing you got to be careful about, I have seen some inappropriate horses at therapeutic riding stables. We won't have that here. Yeah. Where someone donates a horse and it bucks or it does something else bad, you have to have the right, you're working especially with young autistic kids, you got to have really gentle horses. Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing. That's a big lesson for us here, because in many cases, as you say, it's the horse that doesn't succeed somewhere else that sometimes is left to this job. And that's not the right, not the right pathway. Unfortunately, I have seen some really inappropriate horses in some therapeutic riding centers. Well, we'll take your advice on that. I think many people listening will be of a like view. Thank you very, very much indeed. Okay. Well, thank you for having me. So I'll sign off now. Right. Thank you.